Hello everyone. So in this video, I just wanted to talk about the actual purpose the brain plays in the body. Last video I talked about the different parts of the brain and their specific functions, but now I want to talk about what purpose the brain plays and what its responsibilities are in the body and how it carries out messages and tells your body what to do. Again, it's not going to be too technical and full of detail, but I will get more into that in future videos. Okay, so here's a diagram of the nervous system. So basically what the nervous system is it's a network of nerves that either delivers messages from the brain to different parts of the body, or it delivers messages from different parts of the body to the brain. For instance, if you're taking a math test and you want to write something down, like the answer, then that's your brain telling your hand to write something down. On the other hand, if you get burned on your hand, then that's your hand sending a message to your brain that your hand is burned and it's hurt and you need to go get water on it. Now, the nervous system is broken into two major parts, which is the central nervous system, consisting of the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which are all the other nerves that you see extending out to the body. Now, the peripheral nervous system, all those other nerves that you see, is further broken down into two subcategories, which is the cranial nervous system and the spinal nervous system. Now, the cranial nervous system are nerves extending directly from the brain or skull, whereas the spinal nervous system are nerves extending from the spine. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how the peripheral nervous system is broken into two subcategories, the spinal nerves and the cranial nerves. So first I'm going to talk about the spinal nerves. So the spinal nerves, again, are nerves extending directly from the spine. And the nerves extending out of some parts of the spinal cord have different functions. So the spinal cord is divided into 5 parts: the cervical, the thoracic, the lumbar, the sacral, and the coccygeal, or the tailbone, as it's more commonly named. So the cervical is responsible for getting and giving messages to the neck muscles, the diaphragm, the deltoid, which is your shoulders, your wrist, your triceps, and fingers. And so any nerves extending from this part of the spine will be delivering messages from those parts of the body to the brain, or vice versa. Next is the thorax, which is in charge of the hand, the trunk, the abdominals, and the ejaculation, which is the part of your body that lets out waste. So again, any nerves extending from this part of the spine will be responsible for delivering and getting messages to these parts of the body. Now, third down is the lumbar, which plays the role of delivering and taking messages from the hips, the quadriceps, hamstrings, knees, and foot. Next is the sacral, which carries messages from the genitals, the bladder, the bowel, which is below the stomach and intestines. And as you can see, when going down the spine, it goes down the body too. Like, for instance, the clavicle was in charge for the neck, which is in the top part of your body. And we just talked about the sacral, which is in charge for lower parts of your body. So finally is the coccygeal, or the tailbone, which serves as an attachment place for ligaments, tendons, and muscles. And it doesn't really have nerves like going out of it, but it's more just to help ligaments and tendons and muscles find a place to first attach. So the big picture is really the nervous system, which contains all the nerves extending through your body. Like you can see nerves in your wrist, those blue little tubes you see. Those are all nerves that are all consisting of the nervous system. And the nervous system also contains the brain and spinal cord. So just now we talked about the spinal cord and the spinal nerves extending from that. Now I'm going to get even smaller and talk about the actual structure of each of the nerves. Now the nerves extending directly from the spinal cord are shown in the diagram, and so these nerves will branch out and they will create kind of a chain, and the nerves near the spinal cord, like close to the spinal cord, is nerves, and these nerves are called proximal origin, or they're near the proximal origin, which is basically meaning they're near the spinal cord. And again, they're going to branch out, and each time they branch out, they get smaller and smaller and become more distal or farther away from the spinal cord, and eventually become microscopic. So the nerves right next to your spinal cord are really big and thick, but as you go throughout your body, like to your toes, those nerves are going to be very skinny and you won't even be able to see them. Now, the actual structure of the nerves. So, the spinal neuron nerves extending from the spine branch into two kind of wire shapes, as you can see in the diagram. Now, the dorsal root, which is indicated by the blue, is where the efferent neurons travel. Now, the efferent neurons are neurons delivering messages to the brain. So from different parts of the body to the brain. Now the other wire, the ventral root, is where afferent neurons travel. And these are neurons delivering messages away from the brain. So from different parts of the body from the brain to different parts of the body. Now when the dorsal and ventral roots combine, they form the spinal nerve, which have both afferent and efferent neurons running through them. So they're not two separate wires, but they're one combined wire. And the big white and gray matter is called the ganglia, which contains the soma. And I'll discuss that in a few minutes when I really talk about what the general neuron looks like. Okay, again, so the peripheral nervous system is further broken down into the spinal nervous system and the cranial nervous system. So I just talked about the spinal nervous system and the structure and functions of the spinal nerves, and now I'm going to talk about the cranial nerves. So I'm not going to go into too much depth because each cranial nerve has a specific function, and there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. And I'm going to talk about this in future videos, obviously, and each of the functions of these 12. But these 12 pairs of cranial nerves are connected directly to the brain and neck and some parts of your trunk. The cranial nerves send messages about the senses, and they also send messages about muscles in the face, and they also regulate glands in the face. Now, each of the cranial nerves has a specific part again, so I will talk about each of the functions in a future video to go more in depth. Okay, so far we talked about the nerves, which are the pathway for the messages. So now I'm going to talk about the actual nerve cells. The nerve cell is a cell of the nervous system that transmits and receives messages from the peripheral nervous system and goes to the brain, or vice versa. So this is the cell that actually goes through those tubes that were in the diagrams in the spinal nerves structure diagram, and the actual cells that go through and transmit messages that you saw in the tubes in the cranial nerves And each part of this nerve cell helps it carry out its function. So, like any other eukaryotic cell, which eukaryotic just means having a nucleus, this cell has a nucleus, which is that blue circle in the figure. So this basically just contains DNA and chromosomes that make up the cell. Now the green body outside the nucleus is called the soma, or the cell body, as I kind of talked about before. And this connects the nucleus to the dendrites, which are the branches. Now, the dendrites receive the stimuli from other nerve cells. So basically, there are a bunch of these nerve cells connected to each other, and they transmit the stimuli. The stimuli goes through them. And the dendrites basically take the stimuli from another nerve cell, or from the cranial or spinal cells directly, and carry it through the soma and then to the axon, which is that long tail part of the cell. The axon is this long tail because it must deliver or take messages to the next nerve cell. So it's making that chain. So it's serving the purpose of distance. So some of these axons can be like 3 feet. Some can be, again, as you go out farther into the body, like your toes, it's going to be smaller because the nerves are getting smaller. Also, the curve connecting the axon and dendrites is called the axon hillock. And it just, again, serves the purpose of connecting the axon and the dendrites. Finally, the branches at the end of the cell, of the axon, are called the terminal, which basically connects other nerve cells' dendrites. So the dendrites of another nerve cell connects to the axon of some other nerve cell, and it transmits the message or the stimuli and creates a chain. Now you might notice that around the axon there are these big blobs. These blobs are called myelin sheath, which are made up of Schwann cells. Schwann cells are further made up of protein and fatty substances, and they insulate the axon and make sure that the impulses are transmitted quickly and efficiently. And so basically they're protecting the axon. So now you also might notice that there are gaps in between these myelin sheath. These are called the nodes of Ranvier. And they were named after a pathologist, Louis Antoine Ranvier, who notices the gaps in between the myelin sheath. Now, these gaps serve the purpose to allow messages to travel increasingly more efficiently, because the gaps are dense with ions, and which allow impulses or the stimuli to jump from one node of Ranvier to the next, and they are able to get energy and are regenerated, and they're able to travel really quickly through the axon and through different nerve cells, getting your message across to the brain or to Okay, so I realize this might be getting a little confusing, so I'm just going to give you a quick recap. So, the nervous system is everything you see here, the nerves, the spinal cord, and the brain. And there are two main categories, the central nervous system, which is the brain and spine, and the peripheral nervous system, which is all of the nerves extending from the brain and spine. The nerves extending from the spine are the spinal nervous system, and the nerves extending directly from the brain are the cranial nervous system. Now, the spinal nerves that the ventral root and dorsal root are only found in the nerves that are extending directly, that are connected directly to the spine. And remember, the different parts of the spine have different functions. Now, the cranial nerves are found in the brain, extending from the brain, and they also have specific functions, which we didn't get to talk about in this video. Now, the nerve cell, with the axon and dendrites and everything, that's what makes up the physical nerve, and that's what actually gets the stimuli to the brain, or gets the stimuli to different parts of your body. So I hope that was a helpful little recap. Okay, so now here's a quick little review quiz to help you review. So the first question is, what does the nervous system comprise of? If you need extra time, just pause the video. So the nervous system comprises of the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves extending across the body. Question 2. What are the 5 parts of the spine? If you want an extra challenge, then name the function, the responsibilities of each of those 5 parts, to what part of the bodies they send messages to and collect messages from. The 5 parts of the spine are the cervical, the thoracic, the lumbar, the sacral, and the coccygeal, or the tailbone. Question 3. What does the dorsal root do, and what does the ventral root do? The dorsal root delivers messages to the brain, while the ventral root carries messages to other parts of the body. Question 4. Label the parts of this nerve cell. A hint is that there are 7 parts. Okay, so it's the nucleus, the cell body, the dendrite, the axon, which is the long tail part, the nodes of Ranvier, which are the gaps, the myelin sheath, which are made of the Schwann cells, which are the blobs, and the axon terminals. Also, there is one more part, which I didn't include in the 7, and that was the axon hillock, which connects the cell body, the dendrites, to the axon. So bonus points if you got that right. How many pairs of cranial nerves are there? This is the last question, question 5. And the answer is there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Did you get them all right? If so, that is really great. And if not, then just be sure to go through the video and to the parts where you missed some questions. Also, if you got the challenge portion of the first question, that's really, really good. And I look forward to making more videos, and make sure to comment down below if you have a particular part of the brain or body you want me to talk about in future videos. So here just a list of my sources that I used for this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.